Hello all. I wish I could say it's good to see you. I want to be able to see you. I'm afraid I can't be there with you today because I'm currently celebrating a mass. It will be at this time, a funeral mass for Geraldine's aunt Rita Goff. So I ask you to pray for her, the repose of her soul at this time. I'm very sorry I won't be with you. I love meeting and coming to this group. It's such a great thing that it's continued after the Lenten Reading group so long ago now, and that there are other people have come in, so it's great. Tony asked me to be able to try and find some kind of video input that might be suitable for this next session for about 10 minutes. I've been scouring we've got a vast kind of library of videos that might be appropriate, but I wanted to be able to provide something specific because something that would be really helpful, and I couldn't really find anything. So what I wanted to talk about and find something was about the role of Alpha in the three parishes for us, but as I said, I couldn't really find something really good, and I thought, well, maybe if I just try to give some kind of input that you can discuss, and hopefully it can be helpful, and if it's not, I apologise, and hopefully we'll be able to find something more. So I'm going to plan to speak about 10 minutes about the role of Alpha in terms of a kind of a wider process. I know that there are some people saying, well, all we're hearing is Alpha, 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 and is that it? What's coming next after Alpha? And look, many people are just sort of feeling, well, look, they're kind of aware of kind of the values, the spirituality of Alpha and the things it does, and maybe some people think, well, look, that's not my kind of spirituality. It's not my kind of thing. Maybe some people don't feel like talking about their faith in that kind of group context, so don't feel comfortable with it, that it might be a bit too evangelical, that it comes from the Church of England a kind of background, and maybe for some people it's kind of like, well, I've moved from there, so maybe that's you. Maybe you feel like that, and maybe you've had an experience of it and you've said, look, I've tried it, I don't like it. And so I just wanted to kind of speak about it in view of a wider process that maybe Father Sean and I haven't really articulated, that's touched it is touched in the book, Divine Renovation, but maybe it needs to be kind of spoken about a bit more. So firstly, I apologise for that, but hopefully this can help, and you might start to hear a little bit more about a wider process. One of the things that St. Benedict's did, maybe a year or 2 years into their process, is they devised something called the game plan. The game plan. And I've got it here. Excuse the rudimentary nature of this. But if I can just hold that up, it's back to front for me, but hopefully you can see that. It's got 7 elements. This is the kind of vision statement, or the purpose statement. It explains what their aim is. It's how St. Benedict Parish forms disciples who joyfully live out the mission of Jesus Christ. And he's got these 7 elements: invitational church, Alpha, Alpha team, connect groups, ministry, discipleship groups, worship. This isn't I'll hold this up there, this isn't something linear. This is just elements that people can pop in and out of. But these are the kind of the elements that St. Benedict's, they use the term game plan to kind of describe as a default. If someone was to come in without knowing anything, if you were to invite a family member, a lapsed person, someone who you work with, or a neighbour, if you feel God is calling you to invite them to something, then this is the kind of maybe a default game plan for them. It might not work for them, but as a default, a general kind of norm, that would be what they would suggest. It's a normal process of forming missionary disciples, people who have experienced God's love in their life in a very practical way and through his church, and who want to actually invite other people to experience that too. So if I can just go through a little bit about this game plan and talk about how Alpha connects with it, and really how, just the role of Alpha in all of this, and just maybe about speaking into some of the um, feelings that some people might be having, so that maybe that connects with you, maybe it connects with some people that you know. So the first value that it has here, the first step, is being an invitational church. And I would say this is less of being an invitational church, it's less of a kind of a stage as a kind of a value. Being an invitational church, it permeates all the other 6 elements. And it's one of the key values of being a missionary, being invitational. Sometimes we think of being missionary, and we might think of some very hardened man who likes to kind of preach very emphatic sermons, but actually the word invitational is probably a little bit better as a missionary, because it's something a bit gentler. It's something that's formed over time through trust, through love, through these types of relationships. So yeah, in being an invitational church is a value, that kind of an expectation that maybe Father Sean and I would want to try and invite people into, is to get that experience of inviting people. So often in the church, I know I find it's very difficult to sometimes find something appropriate to which I can invite a lapsed member or a non-church going person that they're going to feel comfortable in. So I think in the church, someone said that we've got lots of deep ends. So if we've got lots of things going on in the church that are kind of very nourishing for us, because we kind of know what it's all about. So we have the Mass, we have the sacraments, we have very deep theology, philosophy, we've got lots of wonderful spiritualities, Benedictine spirituality, Ignatian, Carmelite, Augustinian, you name it. We've got quite a distinct code of ethics, of morals, which maybe seem a bit archaic or a bit out of place in modern society. So we've got all these kind of elements of faith that it's not always easy to invite other people into, because they can be obstacles if it's not shallow enough. And so what we want Father Sean and I to do is to try and give everyone who's in church something to which they can invite their friends and families, lapsed Catholics, whoever it is, something they can invite them to that they're going to experience as kind of comfortable, normal, hopefully positive and pleasant. And this is the main reason why we use Alpha as a tool. So we become an invitational church, and it's so easy to invite someone to Alpha. Alpha, as you know, it's the Greek for beginning. It's just the first kind of step. It's a shallow end. And you could say, well, it's just shallow. I'll leave that with you. But it's purposely kind of, in one sense, shallow and superficial, because we need to give something that's just accessible to people, something they can just have food, an easy theological input, basic input, and an opportunity to discuss. And that's it, no commitment necessary. And hopefully also during that Alpha, they can have that kind of, it's not a shallow, but it's an initial experience of God's love. And Pope Benedict XVI said that he talked about an encounter with Christ, that everyone needs to have just an encounter, and especially as adults, that not many adults, even who go to church, have necessarily had that encounter of God's unconditional love in Jesus, that Jesus loves them unconditionally, to have that as an experience, not just as a theory, but to go through something in their life and to experience God's unconditional love. And some people experience that on Alpha, and maybe on that. I know lots of people who do have an experience it on the weekend or the Alpha day. So Alpha also does other things, as well as just introducing people gently and maybe giving people that kind of experience of God's love. But it trains people to become leaders. It trains people to have an instinct to love and to welcome and to invite people who maybe haven't had that experience before. And that's the reason why in the game plan they have this other element, Alpha Team, as you can see there, just after Alpha. People who go on Alpha and who have maybe experienced it as something positive, can be invited back onto Team. And there are many different elements of coming back onto Team. It can be If you're someone who loves talking to people, it can be to be a welcomer. It can be someone who's a small group host, someone to facilitate discussion. If you're not particularly comfortable with, talking to people, maybe you're better administratively or in other things. There are roles with working the AV, audio-visual equipment, of being a small group helper, where you just listen. You don't say anything. You're not expected to say anything. Or it could be helping on hospitality, so helping with food, and in other administrative tasks. It's all missionary, but just according to people's gifts and the needs of the church. So having that kind of experience, together, really helps train people to not just experience as a guest, but to experience it for other people. And it's a great gift to be able to do that, and it's something I really enjoy as well, being on Alpha Team. After being on Alpha Team, being trained in those different roles, and you can do different roles, you can come back to help on different roles. The expectation and the invitation is to come to connect groups. So if you can do Alpha and go straight to a connect group, you can do Alpha Team and go to a connect group. Connect groups is the main thing. So we talk a lot about Alpha, but it's connect groups that is the main life. Apart from Sunday Mass, it's what nourishes us, especially during the week. So what are connect groups? Well, they are groups are around 20 to 35 people who have been through Alpha. Usually it will be through people who have been through Alpha. And they meet every other week on the same kind of format as an Alpha. So they would meet maybe in someone's home, so it can get quite cosy. They would meet for food. People would bring and buy different, like a potluck, I think, or shared. There will be some kind of input that will be given by a layperson, ideally, in real time, a lay leader. And the lay leader can be male or female, can be younger or older, and it can be just to talk about an aspect of faith that maybe you find particularly nourishing, or you think other people would find nourishing. And it can also involve just a personal element of faith as well. So it's good to have just a little bit of a testimony to say how God has worked in your life, and that kind of some kind of input that talks about faith based on that kind of experience, without getting an appropriate disclosure. But often testimonies can be a very powerful thing that people connect with. And after that input, about 10 minutes, you go into smaller groups. So maybe there'll be a few groups, and there will be a leader kind of facilitating each group, just to have open, non-judgmental discussion about how the input has affected them. And this is a great moment because it can be very relevant to people's lives. Often it's in those moments where you're able to share, actually, this thing's going on at work, or this thing's going on in a relationship, this thing's going on with my family, extended family, or this is just what I'm experiencing today, and it's helped me because, or I've related to that because. So this is great because it actually helps build community as well. It builds strengthening trust of bonds. So it's a great thing to have those discussion groups. Afterwards, there will be a time of prayer. So we maybe sing some kind of music, can be traditional hymns. There in St. Benedict's, they tend to be a little bit more of contemporary style of songs of praise. And then they would go into a time of prayer. So, and often it's a moment where you can bring the prayers, the things that maybe you've discussed in the group, to prayers. And maybe if it's for someone else, again with appropriate disclosure and with appropriate confidentiality, just to pray for a person who may be going through something, who just needs something from God. So it can be a beautiful moment. So the connect groups I've been to in St. Benedict's, I've been to a few, and they were so much fun. And I thought, that why don't we do this more often? It was a Christian house party, and the people didn't want to leave because it was the highlight of their 2 weeks. So obviously Mass is the Mass, but in this situation they're able to have an experience of church that was even more personal, even more intimate than sometimes a Mass it doesn't always lend itself to that. It's got another kind of purpose. This helps kind of nourish that Sunday experience because you get to know the people you're worshipping with because of these midweek connect groups. Just another thing to add about these connect groups is that there will be a small number of lay leaders in every kind of connect group. They are in effect excuse the North American term, but pastors. I don't want to use the word priests because there can be a kind of a connotation there, but basically they're the pastors of the connect group. They exercise their lay baptismal priesthood in this way. And Moses, when he was in the desert and he was inundated with his pastoral responsibilities, one of the other elders said to him, "Why don't you just create other leaders to help be a kind of a shepherd to your flock? Because you've got too many." So that's what he did. And this is in effect what's happening here. The priests, Father Sean and myself, will be supporting a group of people who will be supporting these lay leaders. And so it's a kind of a hierarchy of service, a hierarchy of support. And because Father Sean and I, there are about 1,000 people who come to Mass maybe at some points during the year, maybe a bit more, 750 regularly every week. But we can't have a personal, direct responsibility for every one of those. It's just not feasible. And so we kind of need a kind of a hierarchy, a kind of a system where lay people can minister to lay people as well, where it's not just on Father Sean and myself because it's just not possible, it's just not feasible. As much as we would love to, we can't. And the other reason we can't do it is because we have to minister to people outside of the church. One of the roles Father Sean and I have, it's not just to be a minister to people who come to church, but it's everyone in the geographical area, people who are not Christian. And this is why evangelization is so important, because we're not just existing for ourselves. I'm not just serving, and Father Sean isn't just serving these 3 parishes who come to church. And it's important that we know this because often we can then just focus in on ourselves. And this is when we become, this is when we start to die, because it's too self-involved. As much as we need that nourishing, it can cripple, it can stuntify us. Lay people, lay leaders need to be raised in order to raise up other leaders and to bring people into maturity. And it's another way. I hear lots of people say, well, why shouldn't there be women priests? Well, I think this is a great way to have a kind of a lay leadership, a lay responsibility to pastor people in a really healthy way, what the Second Vatican Council kind of is promoting. So it's a really relevant model Father Sean and I would like to introduce and to at least present that I think can have a real benefit for the parish in a wider sense. So that's connect groups, and as I said, connect groups, that's the thing that will be running long term. Alpha, it's just the beginning, it's just a pump to get people in, but the real wonderful things happen, relationships formed, people cared for, happens in the connect groups. That's what it's really, that's the heart, that's the kind of the bread and butter, I would say. The next aspect after connect groups would be ministry. So within the context of the connect groups, the lay leaders can start a discussion with the people they've built relationships with about possible future ministries. And this is based on an acronym called FACT, F-A-C-T, faithful, available, contagious, and teachable. Faithful, that they've faithful to Jesus Christ and his church. Available, that they've got the time to minister, so you don't want overburdening people. Contagious, that they're going to be people who are going to, when people encounter them, are going to be lifting their spirits as opposed to kind of crushing them. Just people who are going to be easily approachable. And teachable, people that you're able to have a conversation with about how to grow as a leader. So it's these people and it's these occasions in the connect groups, so you can have a discussion about where God and how God might be calling them to minister, in what way. Ministry in the current climate tends to be about I need someone to plug a gap. A priest needs someone to plug a gap. So you ask someone to do something for them. They end up doing it all their life, thinking, well, Father asked me, and it's a great privilege. But sometimes, as priests, leaders, we don't take enough consideration as to, well, actually, what is this person's gift? Am I actually helping them to grow in this leadership role? Am I helping them to look for other leaders? Oftentimes what happens is that these people will have a role, as great as they are, they would have them all their life. No one else knows what they're doing. They then, maybe get ill or whatever, and then it all falls down. And then we're back to square one again. So what Father Sean and my vision about ministry is about people being unleashed to do what God is calling them to do, based on their personal gifts and for the need and what the needs of the church are, and that they will be supported. That no one will be in a ministry where they're not being supported, and that's where the connect groups come in, and the leaders, that they're able to walk with people in their ministry, find out what they can do to support them, and also then it can also always come up or down the ladder, as it were, to find out how other layers of leaders can help in that way. And there are many resources we have available to help discern what people's gifts might be. So, and there are lots of different ministries, not just in the church, but outside the church. So the next step is discipleship groups. Discipleship groups, again, this is not linear, but discipleship groups are really important for us, I think, in our context with some of the questions we might be having. These groups are like an offshoot of connect groups. Connect groups are just every other week. It's a constant kind of pattern. But discipleship groups happen maybe 3 or 4 times a year. They are largely about the aim of connect groups is that community, deepening of prayer life, and the faith life. And discipleship groups are more about sort of the catechesis, about unlocking the richness or the full richness of the Catholic faith. So it's in these groups, maybe they would last for about 6 weeks at a time, 4 times a year, let's say. And there would be about between half a dozen to 10, 12 people. And so you could explore things together based on what people really want. So it could be about an aspect of the church's theology, an aspect of the church's philosophy, maybe about a biblical understanding of a particular aspect, about the different spiritualities, about maybe Catholic social teaching or ethics or prayer. So we would encourage, and Father James Mallon would encourage some people to go to at least one a year, so they can build up that intellectual side of their faith and other aspects of faith. So it's really about exploring the richness, the full richness of the Catholic faith. And I think this is important. The discipleship groups are really important to dispel the myth that Alpha is, that we have to embrace exclusively and only things that are very particular to Alpha. So I think some people think that the charismatic element and spirituality that Alpha embraces means that that's the only thing that Father Sean and I would want to promote and encourage. And that is not the case at all. So while it's true that Father Sean and I would like to give people permission to experience a more charismatic element of faith, we would like to affirm just a few points. And the first point is that Father Sean and I are not fully experienced in this style of worship and praying. So we understand how people feel. We just feel that it is very biblical and it seems to bear a lot of fruit. But the second thing is we don't expect or want people to abandon other types of spirituality and methods of praying. So I'm very much influenced by my spiritual director, and he has a doctorate on St. John of the Cross and a particular love for the Carmelite spirituality. And I'm more naturally inclined toward contemplative spirituality, such as the Carmelites. Father Sean, I know, discerned a vocation to the Benedictines as an Anglican. And many people who go through Alpha and through the game plan at St. Benedict's and elsewhere end up, in their process of maturation, being nourished and getting really involved by the other Catholic spiritual treasures, such as Ignatian spirituality, Carmelite spirituality. I see this time and time again, that it doesn't just stop with the charismatic spirituality and prayer and whatever comes with it, it often finds that it's nourished in deeper ways. But the third thing is about charismatic. I mean, what does it really mean? It means gifts. Charism is a gift, and it's asking for the gifts that can help us to love God and other people to know God's love too. So Ron Huntley, Father James Mallon's sort of right-hand man, as it were, said that the charismatic communities for the last 40, 50 years, as great as they are, and they have been in nourishing so many people, have sometimes, perhaps by its own nature, they have to be a little bit more experimental, but maybe in that they've sometimes lacked the necessary kind of leadership structures and healthy leadership principles. And one of the things that Divine Renovation and the principles involved in it, what it does really well, is that it really tries to cling to particular leadership principles that can bring about a healthy culture, and especially when it comes to a charismatic prayer. Because I know that many people have had experiences of this in one of the three parishes, perhaps, and all of them are in other places, and then it wasn't particularly healthy for them. And so Father Sean and I would want to put in place those structures and norms so that people who are maybe coming into it for the first time are going to feel safe, they're going to feel comfortable, that it'll be introduced in a pastoral way, and that it wouldn't be seen as the only way to pray, but a way to have an initial experience of faith. So the other element that really begins, completes, but also sort of suffuses the process after this kind of discipleship is worship. And what does worship mean? It means basically love. To worship is to love and an expression of love. So it's out of love that we invite people on this first, that we become invitational. It's out of love that we invite people because we've loved the experience of Jesus and his Holy Spirit. We invite people to Alpha. It's out of love that we would want to take time to serve on the Alpha team. It's out of love that we would want to connect with other people every other week. It's out of love that we would want to serve and minister out of the gifts God has given us and the needs of the church. It's out of love that we would want to deepen knowledge and understanding and experience of the full treasures of the Catholic faith. And it's out of love that ultimately we would commit to come to Mass every week, because the Eucharist is the source and summit of the Catholic faith. But it's also worth mentioning that the source and summit of the Catholic faith, it involves and it presumes evangelization. So that's why you have all the other stuff kind of before worship. But worship's kind of involved overall in all of it. This has been a long time, 27 minutes. I apologise for that. It was only supposed to be 10. So I hope you found it helpful anyway. The aim was just to see how Alpha fits into a broader vision. Father Sean and I have this game plan as a potential process. It isn't anything that's definitely validated. I'm giving this to you just as just something just gentle that you can maybe be helpful. Part of the process of what Father Sean and I are seeing is involves lay co-responsibility. So we will have a joint parish pastoral council formed in the new year, and its specific role will be to formulate a wider game plan. Maybe, not like that necessarily, but it may be involving some of the principles. So it's not all about Alpha. Alpha is important, but it's just the beginning. There are principles in Alpha that we would hope to continue throughout the process of people's faith lives here in the churches. But the main thing is that we do not expect or become content when people fall away from faith. That it's Father Sean and my hope and dream that the expectation in these three parishes is that people are going to know the love of Jesus Christ, experience it in a very meaningful, practical way in their lives, and that they would be formed and nourished to be able to share that joy and that story with others. And we would just look forward to hearing lots of stories about how God has worked in their life, and hopefully the process that I've just spoken about, that kind of process, can kind of help. Once again, I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have a good discussion, and I very much hope to see you all soon at the next meeting. Thanks. God bless.